was incredibly nervous until I looked on your wall and I saw a picture of James Agee, and I said, I'm home free. I attribute my somewhat dubious ability to work under loud, noisy, atmospheric circumstances to having worked at the Herald for so many years. There were no cubicles, no nothing, and you were constantly surrounded by people. You know, you're trying to write deathless prose, and you know, the guy next to you is on the phone going, the head was severed where? I always tried to sit next to Jim Bacon since it was a losing because Jim was just amazing. I mean, he would get on the phone and, you know, he's just, the Jerry Ford Open is where? I got to take the polar route to the what's the name of that place in South Africa where Frank gives Botswana? How do you spell it? And it was just all of these stories. And who's the actress in Night of the Iguana? Sue Lyon. Yeah, I heard that Sue Lyon had walked in off the street. Her career was kind of on the skids and had gone into a job trying to get, you know, some temp work. And I heard this like fourth hand, but I told it to Jim, and like, whoa, this big story ends up in the paper. Thank God it was true. But I go back to the Herald for so many years that I can actually remember lending Jim Cramer money. Oh my God! He was a cub reporter. I also remember the confluence of Hollywood and journalism when, in the Visigoth era of the Herald, when they before they made the economically unsound decision to stop movie crews from filming there, Richard Brooks was filming a movie called Fever Pitch. And they put a little notice up on the bulletin board saying that there was going to be this movie being filmed there. And they had, you know, like Ryan O'Neal and John Saxon. So apparently John Saxon would not enter the building until he had better billing on the tack notice on the my final story is Andrea Herman here? Okay then. I got called in once to her office. And by the way, I went back into the Herald building years ago just to scout around, and it's now a prison cell, which I think is more than metaphorical. But so she calls me into her office and she says, you know, I want to know why you're the movie critic. You've done nothing on the death of Woody Allen. I said, yes, Woody Allen is dead. Where are you? It took me a while to figure out she was talking about Woody Herman. She had similar problems with Paul Simon and Senator Paul Simon. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. After seeing some greetings in here, Pam mentioned Andrew Jaffe, and Andrew Jaffe would have loved to have been here tonight. He was dying to be here. But Andrew lives in Connecticut. He's had some health issues, but he's doing good now, and he's got his own business, consulting and writing and doing other stuff. And he said to make sure everybody knows that if it was up to him, he would be here right among us. I want to go back to the panel for a minute, if I may. You know, the Herald, I think, one of the hallmarks, the Herald did certain things really well. The style section, the sports section. It also did politics differently than anybody else. And the fact that we have these three people, I want to ask each of the panelists to briefly talk to me about how the Herald covered politics and how it was different than that other paper up the street, the one that Jim named The Whale. Don, how about you?
Well, it was with a wing and a prayer is how we did it. I remember it
What do you mean by that?
during the 84...
He was the wing and he was the prayer.
During the 84 presidential campaign, Mary Ann had an all-white party at the LA Athletic Club. And she was kind enough to give me a copy of Don Quixote, because that's how we were trying to cover that year's presidential campaign against the LA Times. But you know,
Actually, it was an after the Olympics coverage party. When you say it's an all-white party connected to the presidential campaign, it sounds really weird. But it was a celebration of the coverage that we had. Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to give you a little political.
All white mean everybody wore
Yeah,
white.
right. Yeah, right. We were white, but it was after the Olympic coverage in '84.
you're absolutely
Sorry.
correct. Yes. And the attire was all white. Yes. But I think the main thing is, you know, as politics editor, that meant that I worked with everyone who, you know, from our coverage of the presidential campaign, which Linda was the mainstay of, and down to city hall and county government reporting. But, you know, the name of Andy Ferrillo was invoked earlier. I mean, the thing that struck me when I first got to Los Angeles is how serious the Herald was in terms of really trying to pay attention at that time to the gang problem and how oblivious the LA Times was. And, you know, I pick up when I got into town yesterday and picked up the LA Times, and I see the front page picture that they had of the funeral of this latest tragic killing, the 17-year-old football star in South
Since
LA.
Ansel spoke up, they decided to cover local news by
There you
discovering there's a gang problem in LA.
But,
it's a big story.
You know, the Herald really did, you know, really prod ultimately the Times to, you know, pay more attention to what was happening in Los Angeles.
Hopefully. Linda, what was the difference between covering the news for the Herald and covering it for anybody else?
I never covered it for anyone else.
You covered it for television.
Yeah.
No difference, actually. No, I mean, for me, no. I mean,
I
no.
mean, I thought to me the Herald had a unique style.
Mike Kerr.
And tell us about Mike Qualls more than Mike Kerr. The late Mike Qualls.
You were Mike Kerr. Remember they called and you gave that great quote?
I remember something about it.
No, okay. Well, what the Herald did politically and covering politics, I kind of covered it more from the. I just covered it. And I think the Times always sanitized it, and we didn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
We just kind of cut to the chase and just went to the gut of it all, and had a lot of sources and friends. So there's a whole social element to politics. And like right now, you'd be talking about Jerry Ferraro and the Clintons and that whole thing, and why Bill Clinton went off the reservation because he really just wants to be back in the White House again. You know, all this stuff, and they don't cover it. You can read the sanitized LA Times, the sanitized version. You don't get that grist. You don't get that texture in the LA Times coverage. What's going on behind the scenes? Because what makes politics work is all the interplay and the hatred and the envy, and that's what really makes politics go. You never see that in the Times. I'm sorry, no. But you just don't. And I think we had a lot of that. One night I was working late with Marianne Dillon. I hope she's not get mad at me, but what could she do? We were till like 2 in the morning.
Something.
About Ham Jordan. Remember the night Ham Jordan came to play in LA, and we were pulling all these stories together and all these little sources to really paint the picture of what was going on in that party. And Marianne and I were getting giddy. It was like 2 in the morning, and she'd call her sources in D.C. and this is what she's going to. So she was writing the word coke, cocaine, and she misspelled it and wrote.
Don't say it.
That other one. It was really cute. She was like, no, but that's what, and Marianne taught me that. I mean, I remember that night being one of the most learning experiences because you were adding texture to the story and learning all of that. And Mike Wallace came to town, remember, and saw the story and called you, Jim, and asked if I could work with him for a week on that. You know, it's those texture moments, and the Times doesn't really have that. They still don't. They don't, and we could afford to go out and do that. You know, I don't know, we just did, and it was Jim's part of the vision you were talking about with Jim. You know, the Good Samaritan stories and that texture, and just the inside of what's really going on. And toward the end, we had that column, and that's what people want to know. People want to know the inside. They don't want to see some boring, so-and-so and such and such. Well, what does it mean? Why did they do that? Why is Ferraro going nuts? I mean, why did Bill Clinton go nuts the other day? You know, that's what they want to know. And I think, you know, with the guidance of Jim and Marianne, and gave us the okay to do that, that's what we did.
Great, thank you, Linda. Ron, you have what's your point of view on this? Was the way the Herald covered politics when you were an editor there any different than anybody else?
You know, there's never been a great newspaper in Los Angeles. There's never been a writer who broke the back of it. The LA Times, I asked Jim when he was hanging around the Daily News consulting, trying to help us really break through some years ago. And when you were at the Times, there were a choice between you and two others. What would it be like if you had been chosen the editor of the LA Times? And he said it was never going to happen.